Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach. Rolling.
All right.
Hey, Ben's back.
Woo woo. You guys
goodness.
did really good last week. Like I said, I enjoyed listening to the discussion, but it is good to be back.
Yeah.
We learned from the best.
That's
We
Yeah.
just channeled our inner Ben.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
It was
right.
good. So welcome back. We're glad to have you.
Yeah, it's been weird.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, for people who don't know,
He's about to lose a leg, fellas.
yeah,
Pray
basically,
for him.
He's getting old.
I like
I'm
strained
older,
a
it's fine.
muscle, and then I got this blood clot from like my ankle to my just above my knee, and I don't know what to do. I'm on blood thinners, and I'm not supposed to do too much, and so it's just weird. Pastor Bill's been great. You know, he's like, take off, figure out what you're supposed to do, get healthy, don't die, and so far
You've done those
I've
things.
done all those things, so I
That's
listened to
good.
what he said.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to talk today. I came across an article on the MSN homepage, like when I open up my browser. And the title of the article is 15 Shockingly Honest Confessions. What Ruined Religion for You? And the origin of this article was written by Elizabeth Irvin, and it was posted on March 26th of this year. And it comes from kind of like a home website, Sober Healing, which contains various articles and blogs about spirituality, including Christianity, prayer, manifesting acts of kindness. Also includes resources for mental health and sober living addiction struggles. So it's kind of, this article was pulled from that Sober Healing website that has all these kind of resources on it. So Elizabeth Irvin wrote it. 15 shockingly honest confessions. And we're going to dig into a few of them, but the 15 are going to a megachurch, Starbucks kiosks at church, inappropriate letter, which is one that we're going to talk about. So we'll get into that in a minute. Religious people. Also, we'll get into that one. Sidewalk recruiters, which I think we've kind of even talked about on the podcast before. The non-answers. We'll get into that one. Served the church crowd. And I'll just touch briefly on that. That was like somebody was a server at a restaurant, and a Christian couple came in or whatever, and they tipped him with a Jesus brochure. That was how they. So that was one.
The most valuable tip you could leave.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Religious leaders, the treatment of women. We'll get into. Sir, you need to leave is one we'll get into. Childhood sexual abuse. We've touched on that before. Only one is correct. We'll get into that. Breaking the bad news about Santa, moral superiority, and there is no doggy heaven. Which,
Okay.
yeah, those are the 15.
Interesting.
And yeah, I think we should dig into a couple of these here. So I don't know. Do you have anything that stands out to you? You wanna just go from the top.
Yeah, you picked it. You
So we're
narrowed it
covering
down.
6 kind of big ones.
Yeah, that I think,
Yeah.
I've heard anecdotally, I've heard
Yep.
these things, and I've seen some of these things in our
Yeah.
synod.
All right.
So, number
Let's-
one,
Did
Number
you write
one.
any of these?
it was me. My pen name is Elizabeth Irvin.
It was the dog one,
The
wasn't it?
doggy heaven, yeah. Okay, but
Which I don't think that is true.
I don't
You
think
don't,
it's true
you
either.
don't think there's not a doggy heaven?
Well, you need to understand what the whole Bible says. Like it says in Romans chapter 8, all creation is in bondage, waiting to be liberated. So in the renewed world, God made dogs the first time. He's going to liberate all creation. Why wouldn't that be part of that liberated world?
So busted. We didn't even,
Yeah.
that wasn't
Yeah,
even what we were
number
going to talk about, but I
15.
say busted.
Number 15,
That's
we
right.
expect to see you on Sunday.
Elizabeth Irvin. Peep this. But inappropriate letter is one that I want to touch on. So the kind of explanation for that from the article says, a man said when he was 6 years old, the pastor gave a letter to his aunt to give to his mother, stating that their family was not donating enough money to the church. The man further clarifies that they stopped attending and that he's never been to church since. A second person volunteers that their friend's grandmother shared a similar experience. Her church wrote a letter stating they knew her income and that she wasn't donating enough. Essentially, her response was, "Screw you, I'm moving to Mexico." And then finally, a third says the pastor was fortunate that she didn't go full Martin Luther by nailing the letter to the church door. I don't really understand that. But
So taking the letter and putting it on the church door so everyone can see
Yeah.
how
Oh.
she was treated.
oh, well, she should have done that.
That would be funny.
I love that. I'm here for that. And to be clear, this information that she collected was from I don't know if you call it like online support group or online community where people were sharing their experiences. So this is where she grabbed these experiences from. So, I mean, we do that, don't we? We in so many words.
Well, there was a time somebody showed me an old picture back in the 50s or maybe before, where you would publish in the bulletin everybody's giving.
Ooh,
You would put their name and how much they
spicy.
gave. So luckily,
What was the
thankfully,
reason for that?
I'm sure pressure or playing the game. I don't know, but that was kind of accepted for whatever reason. It was bizarre, and that went away. Thankfully, I don't know when that stopped, but you can find old records of publishing people's name and their amount that they've been giving.
They send the church like the tithe enforcer come
Yeah.
to your door.
Yeah.
They'll shake you
Isn't
down.
that like Pharisees? Like, look at me, I'm giving all this
Sure.
money.
Right.
Like,
And then
Yeah, that
exactly,
seems so
so
dangerous.
I think there was no good reason. And I have heard of people who said this. I remember my first congregation, they said they left their church because, they got a phone call that they haven't seen in a while, but it wasn't because they haven't seen in a while, but because they hadn't been giving in a while, and they couldn't believe that. I don't know of any pastors that I know I don't know what people give here. I have no idea how much people give. I know we give a statement at the end of the year so that you can use that for tax purposes and how important that is to make that part of your life, to be generous and to give. That is a part of a spiritual walk, but to use the law and to scare people into that, and usually out of fear. Now, the average church size in the United States, you know what it is?
no.
Wait, let me guess. It's like 200.
I think it's like 40.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm off by 10 either way, I think, because I think it's gone down. It
And
was
40
50.
people
like
are
40 people.
They're supposed to support.
And so I could see, you think about, so if that's the average size, so that there's a lot that are less and a lot that are more. And mega churches are pretty rare when you look at compared to other churches. So you think that maybe in fear, a smaller congregation, you have one pastor or something like that, is afraid and maybe will say something to somebody. But yeah, it's really sad when that happens. But here's the thing, like, if you go to a restaurant and you get really bad service, does that mean you should never go to a restaurant before? Or maybe the people the staff that day was out of whack? There's nothing in the Bible that tells us we should be shaking people down for money or that we should make that the center of their Christian life. And so they're people, and it's an organization, and some of them did some really dumb stuff. But I wouldn't say that means you should stop going out to eat, nor do I think you should say, I'm never going to go to a church again, it's sad. Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I'll look at it in a nicer light and say, maybe if you're giving, particularly if you don't have online options, like if basically your way to give in a church is like a physical offering, and it's not coming in, then they might, pastors and leadership might assume that you're not coming to church.
Sure.
And therefore they might be concerned about you and your well-being.
Sure.
So maybe it was just a really bad way of checking up on somebody and saying like,
Yeah.
are you okay?
Well, because sometimes that's kind of the only way to know people are coming. Like we have, when you come to Victory, you're supposed to sign a connection card, but no one actually does that.
Right.
So it's like, if I didn't see you, then
Right.
the only way I can determine you were here was if you gave money.
Well, and we have members and regular attenders that sometimes we haven't seen for a while, and we're like, oh, maybe somebody should, send an email or make sure
Yeah.
they're okay. But we're not like, hey, we haven't seen you donate anything for
Yeah.
us. It's more like, no, actually, like, we're kind of worried about you, and we want to
Right.
make sure we haven't seen you. You were very involved at one
Right.
point, and you're not anymore. And are you okay?
Right.
So, and I think, and I heard a story 2 days ago from somebody that we all know, I'm not going to name drop, who basically said they had a family member who's in a Wells church get a letter stating, you haven't been here in a while. So,
And I don't think that's wrong, right? That you haven't been here in a while, where we care about you, where
as long as it's presented that way,
Right.
and not like, you haven't been here in a while, therefore you're not giving money, therefore you're not volunteering your time, therefore you're not,
right.
you
I don't know of any pastor who that's their primary concern. I think sometimes with this, like, maybe these are as crass as they really are. I just wonder if you would talk to the pastor and say, is this really what you're concerned about? I mean, is it really that I'm not giving money?
Yeah, put them on trial.
And just see, because I wonder how many of those would be, no, that's not really our primary concern. I've never met a pastor who's done that. Now there are, and like I said, I've heard cases like this too, and when people have come to different churches, and I wonder if under the pressure of a smaller congregation, pastor or people in leadership are not getting paid, can't keep the light on, not knowing what to do, and then your knee-jerk reaction is intimidate. Or if you have a building project and you overestimated what people were going to give, and then maybe the knee jerk is to force. It's just so interesting how when you read the Apostle Paul, the largest section in the Bible on giving is 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. And he masterfully just says, like, I don't want to force you to do this. We know that Christ, who was rich, became poor so that we through his poverty might become rich. He uses the gospel, and what he's trying to collect for is their Jewish brothers and sisters back in Jerusalem who are struggling with poverty, and so gathering an offering for those who are suffering. And so he's trying to really encourage them to give. But that's the temptation. I mean, when you need money, when you want to raise funds,
Desperation.
what are you going to do to get those funds? And fear works, sympathy works, the gospel works, but we don't always just go to the gospel, right? So, yeah, it's really too bad. And then the idea that, okay, that means all churches are wrong, or this is common for all churches.
Or you got to go to Mexico.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
that's
right.
it. I'm leaving to Mexico. That seems a little extreme.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah. Matt, did you have anything on that? You good?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Next one, religious people. And the explanation is this. Only God has the right to judge people. However, one suggests that religious people are the most judgmental people you will ever meet, anybody with a different view of them. I can't help but think of this. I don't really get this reference, but I'm just going to skip that sentence. I love many people who attend church, but I've made some zealots uncomfortable to be around.
So, yeah, I think, what does that mean that, people are judgmental? What I think Jesus does when he talks about that, he says, before you can take the speck out of somebody else's eye, you need to take the plank out of your own eye. And then he says, judge in the same way that you judge others, you too will be judged. And I think that's one of the most important things, because if you aren't judging people, that means you don't really care about them, in the sense of you see them going in a bad way. You see their life coming off the rails, and you're making a judgment on that, like, this is not good. I care about you. You're doing the wrong thing. You're going in the wrong direction. Judgmental is saying, I would never do that. I could never see I've never done any of those kinds of things. And you're using their failures to prop up your, whoever you are, your status, or who you are, your identity. And so I think we do need to judge people in love. Now, if there's another fear too, like we have to keep everybody in this ideology, and we got to keep everybody looking the same here, and it's about making the church look good, or making the family look good, or just keeping in the in crowd, that's a whole nother motivation. But if it's you see somebody going in a direction that's going to be self-destructive, not just for themselves, but also for their relationship with God, it would be unloving not to say something. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the first premise of that quote, of that paragraph, that only God can judge, that's just not true. All people judge all the time. I think people judge people. It's basically we're all making judgments and passing judgments all the time. It's just the more certain you are, you're going to be a little bit more passionate about your judgments usually, because you're more, if you really believe that something is absolutely true, then you're more inclined to call out what is the opposite. Whereas if you're kind of waffling between things, then you are less likely to, or you're less likely to say something because I don't know necessarily, but I think that's wrong. It's the same people. We talk about this endlessly, but everyone who has a political opinion, anyone with an extreme opinion, is so judgmental of the opposite opinion.
Right.
Whilst calling everyone else judgmental.
Yeah, and if you are an animal rights activist and you believe that animals have just as much moral right to live or to not suffer as humans, that's
your core value.
That's a conviction you have.
Right.
So you're going to be very judgmental. And the thing is, you think you're doing the right thing. We as Christians, we have strong views on sexuality and on murder and hatred and stuff like that. And we think we're doing the right thing. And that's a conviction for us. So that's why we're fiery about it sometimes.
I think what can happen inside the Christian churches, we forget the thing that makes Christianity really beautiful is our understanding of original sin, that there's no one who's better than anyone else. And yes, I'm forgiven, but that allows me to also have real tolerance. This tolerance used to be a virtue in our country, and it's not anymore, where tolerance meant, I don't agree with you on everything, but you're a human being. And
right.
I agree that you have worth and value even if we disagree, and we don't have that anymore. And so I think that's really a challenge. I'm reading a fantastic book right now called Low Anthropology by David Zoll, and he says the problem with one of the real problems in our culture is we have a high anthropology. That means we think everyone's pretty good or should be pretty good, and we think that humans have capabilities to do whatever they want, and they should be better, and they should be moral, and they should be crushing it every corner of their life. And because we have that assumption of the potential of human beings, we can be very judgmental. But if we would have a low anthropology, the reality that all of us is probably is struggling more than we want to admit, that has our own vices that we're working through, that we have limits. And a lot of times the things we want to do, we don't do. We scroll through Netflix or whatever, and we know we should be more productive. If we would just be more honest about our limitations, we'd have a lot more compassion with other people. I think you're right. Everybody's judgmental. And it's not like Christianity has the corner. Now, it just seemed like in the past, more of the secular world looked at Christianity as being rigid, and now I feel like all of culture is rigid. And so there is a lot more anger and more rigidity about whatever it is, politics or ideas on health. And I think the COVID showed a whole big. It was an example of that too. So
people, I think people deep down know there is objective truth. Like this, the whatever the objective truth is the source of your meaning.
Right.
And if you're not finding that in Christianity, you'll find it somewhere.
Right.
And that becomes the crusade you put your life on, and that becomes the source of your judgment.
Right.
I think it is that simple.
Yeah.
So everybody is going to have their view of morality, their view of right and wrong, and Christianity does too. I think what makes Christianity unique is forgiveness. We're all breaking the rules. Not only do we have a standard, but we don't live up to our own standards.
Right.
And that's the problem, is I don't think we're always honest about that, and we don't always magnify the gospel. That's the good news, that God had to rescue us, because we can't rescue ourselves.
I think people are like sensitive, like too sensitive to like what it means to like judge. I like just when we say our opinions, we often preface our opinions like, well, in my view, that's not really something you should do. We always say things like, in my opinion, or I think, or in my view. And newsflash, everything you say is your opinion.
Right.
And you don't need to preface it. But if I say, that's wrong, premarital sex is wrong, that sounds a lot more judgmental than, well, I don't really believe you should do that. Even though one is just a watered down version of your opinion.
Well, is it tactful discussion, or is it,
Right.
like...
So sometimes you got to be tactful, but when people, sometimes if they're not speaking directly to someone, if they're posting online, if they're speaking in front of an audience, you just state the truth, because you don't have that person there. You're not empathizing with anybody, so you feel no need to water it down. And I just think as a culture, we need to understand that those are the same thing, and you don't need to take extra offense if something sounds like it's said with more force.
But
than
why
if it's
do you
just-
think people are so easily offended? I think one of the reasons is because we don't have an identity apart from our actions. Now our identity are these causes. Our identity is this morality, whatever morality we've chosen. And again, I think the beauty of Christianity is my identity is I'm a forgiven child of God, and I'm sinful that struggles with sin, and I'm a forgiven child of God, which allows you to challenge me, question me, and yeah, I assume there's going to be things I'm going to get wrong.
Yeah.
But if your whole identity is caught up in your cause or your values, anytime anyone challenges your, anything you're doing, that just is an attack on your identity.
And we're afraid to be, and we're afraid to be wrong. We're like afraid of failure, because if that is your identity and you're wrong, then you are either evil or stupid.
Yeah.
Like there's no grace there,
Right.
because like you just yeah.
So I do think that idea of that high anthropology, that we know what's right, we're crushing it, everybody else is an idiot if you don't have some of that honesty, like, no, I struggle with stuff.
Yeah.
So it is true, though, that I think if your church or faith is built just on an ideology and not on or a system of ideas or a certain way that it's a certain culture, and it's not based on the gospel, the forgiveness of sins, you're going to work really hard to make sure people fit that ideology and fit that culture, not necessarily the reality. We just all need forgiveness. So it is too bad when you see people who are coming to church because they want to be relieved of their burdens, and they get more burdened by judgmentalism. Yeah.
What what can we do as a church body, like to mitigate against that?
Lots of things. I think we always have to check ourselves in our preaching. We have it I think that's why it's good that we continue to have aspects of the liturgy of open up with confession and forgiveness, that forgive us, renew us, lead us, that's always part of the service, so that we remember. And then having the sacrament, this is about it's about Jesus, it's about the forgiveness of sins. And then I think we always have to pay attention to our sermons. If sermons just become a list of more things that we need to do and not about what Jesus has done, I think that can also, we're the group of people who do these things. Well, no, we're the forgiven group of people. And sometimes we do these things, but a lot of times we don't do these things.
Well, and I mean, there's so many times I feel like in your sermons and in Pastor Bill's sermons where like y'all will explicitly say like, well, I screwed up here, or
Right.
like, I think back on when I did this, and it haunts me to this day, kind of thing, I really messed up,
Right.
and it's just really honest, and you don't expect to hear that coming from the pulpit, so to speak.
Right.
You know, like you don't expect to hear that coming from a pastor to be openly, you know, in front of hundreds of people saying,
Right.
boy, I really goofed this one up.
Right.
So I think that's another way too, right? It goes back to that honesty and humility.
Right. Right. And why are you judging this person? Are you actually concerned about the direction they're going, and you know that if they keep going down this road, this is going to end up in a bad place? Or is it a fear that you need to control them to fit a certain group or fit a certain ideology or fit a, you know, are you saying hard things to them because, you know, there's some preachers that I will every once in a while see what they're saying, and one of them, you know, man, there's some things that you say, I'm like, oh yeah, I could see where you're coming with that. But John MacArthur, he's a preacher out in California, and it just seems like he's so rigid that they're doing everything right, and they're the right way of preaching the Bible, and everything that they're saying is exactly the right way, and everybody else is wrong, and there's just no room for vulnerability. There's just no room for I need help. And I haven't heard enough of his sermons to say that's how he always is. It just seems to be the kind of persona that he puts out.
More
So,
concerned with being right than maybe helping
right,
than
correct.
helping someone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you want to, Jesus said, or it said that Jesus came speaking both the truth and love. And sometimes we get so focused on the truth that we don't remember that there's people that need love and forgiveness and compassion. And sometimes there's so much love and compassion, forgiveness, we forget that they need, you know, we all need to change. Our life needs to be different. I think people who are in AA, you can see that balance. The ones that I've spoken to in the meetings that I've sat in, you know, they'll call you on your stuff in love, like, oh, sure, you can handle going to the bar. I'm sure that'll work out good, you know, as a way to saying, what are you thinking? You know, and that's the kind of judgment that's saying, I care about you enough to say, don't go down that road.
And don't they also first admit that they have a problem? Isn't that
Yeah.
like step one? So
Yeah.
they're going to be open to hearing this type of thing,
Exactly.
right? So So
Yep.
I guess that's part of it too, is just being open to acknowledging that you might in fact have a problem.
That's right. Exactly. Is that good? Should go on?
Yeah, I mean, there's like endless amounts you could say on that topic,
Right.
but yeah, let's go to the next one.
Next one is the non-answers, okay, and the explanation. Quote, you just have to have faith, end quote, was the biggest non-answer to all one man's questions as a kid. He called this response a foolish way to dismiss a curious mind. A second commenter admits he asked his grandmother where God came from, and she smacked him across his face, stating, we don't ask questions like that. He explains he was genuinely curious and attempting to understand. Still, her reaction shocked him and was the beginning of being turned away.
That sounds similar to what I've heard from Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code, that when he was in grade school, he said, you know, I'm reading in all my science textbooks that the world's billions of years old and that, you know, Darwinian evolution, all those things, and then I read in the Bible that the earth was created in 6 days. Which one's right? And he went to his priest, and I think it was Episcopal priest, and he said, good boys don't ask such questions. And then he said, oh, that's when everything changed for me. Science makes sense, but the Bible doesn't make sense, is how he kind of worded it in his explain why he left the faith. And then unfortunately, he's written these bestseller books that kind of poke fun at Christianity and about anybody who would believe these things. So I think it's pretty common, and I don't know what it comes from. You know, again, I think maybe fear. If a leader doesn't have the answers, and so you get some really hard questions, and so you say, you kind of shut down the conversation, use your power and authority or whatever to shut down the conversations, and you maybe just assume, oh, these are silly kids. You know, they're just trying to give me a hard time. But a lot of these, as kids are growing up, I mean, you can notice that, especially like middle school, they really start to have some really challenging, tough questions. I don't always have the answer to them, you know, when I'm taking them through confirmation class or even my own kids. And I think you have to say that.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Let's keep walking with this for a while and see if we can come up with the answer.
I think part of the problem is like people will say like God's ways are far above our ways, or you got to have faith. Those are both true.
Right.
Like, yeah, but that doesn't always help someone where they're at.
Right.
I'm thinking of an interview with Stephen Fry, British actor, comedian. I don't know if you guys know who that is. Okay. He's written some books too, but you know, it was the same. It was the age old question, and someone asked him, you know, like, oh, why don't you believe in God? And he just said, like, I don't believe that a loving God could give an 8-year-old child bone cancer.
100%.
Right.
That's a tough one.
That's hard, and you could say, well, like, God's ways are above our ways.
Yeah.
But that's not going to help someone where they're at, and it doesn't help ease the pain. It's not a comfort to them. It's true,
Right.
you know, and that, you know, that particular example it comes from a faulty assumption. Like, you are assuming, because wrapped up in that question is an implication, like, well, so it would be more fair if God gave a mass murderer bone cancer. Right? Like, someone who's more deserving should get that.
Right.
Not an
Somebody's got to get it.
innocent
Yeah,
child.
right.
Right.
Well, God doesn't punish people with cancer, you know, but that's a human assumption that we reap what we sow. But you can't say that in the moment.
Yeah.
Like, you can say God's got a plan, but you know what that person needs is just human comfort, understanding, conversation, sympathy. They don't need you to, like, hold the Bible over their head and say, you know,
No, you got to have faith.
be smarter.
Yeah.
There it is. It's up there. You know, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. You know.
It's interesting how the Bible also responds to this by telling the story of Job. And the story of Job is Job suffers these horrible atrocities, loses his health, his wealth, and worst of all, his children. And his 3 so-called friends, you know, just kind of pick at him and trying to figure out why this happened to him. And a lot of it comes from their own fear, that I want to make sure this doesn't happen to me. So I got to figure out what Job did wrong to anger God, so that I don't do that, and none of these bad things happen to me. And in the end of the book, although Job rages against God and yells at God and is mad at God, it's the 3 friends who tried to figure God out in every moment and try to blame Job that received correction from God and discipline from God and needed forgiveness. And so, yeah, you're right. I think a lot of this, you need some more pastoral care, not just a quick answer. And I've really appreciated people who've told me, like, I don't know, but I'll walk with you as long as you want, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it. And I think that's the way to answer it. But, yeah, it's really sad.
I think people have a view of religion like it's this separate, higher field of study, that it should be a place with answers. It should be a place that gives you purpose.
Yeah.
It should be a place of a higher moral standing than the average person. And I think that we as Christians have played into that a lot.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of wrapped up. It's kind of inevitable in some ways, but it is an organization of people. That's what the church is, and we do have answers, you know, but it's not, you know, we're almost treating it like, you know, like we were talking about, like the Gnostic view of Christianity, where it's like, you know, you can enter in and you ascend to some higher level of humanity, and now we're going to teach you all these truths and we're enlightened and this sort of thing. And it's like, nope, not true. It's, you know, it's people, and they screw up. And, you know, we work here at church, and we're trying to do the Lord's work. We're trying to spread the gospel, but that could be anybody. You know, we're not special here at church.
Sure. I do believe, you know, God is at work inside of the church, like that He's not necessarily to give you the final answer on suffering or the final answer on science versus God, or figure out all the origin debates, but I do think God is it's not just people, that God is at work among His people. And yet inside of the church, there are people who manipulate. We're still sin. I liked how Luther said we're both sinners and saints at the same time, and sometimes our selfishness and our fear and want control get the best of us. And when somebody has a question, and so it's fascinating. The young people have asked me the most challenging questions are the ones who've been through really hard things. And so they're trying to figure out these really hard things. And so they throw out questions about science or about, archaeology or about the truth of the Bible. And really it goes back to that pain question. Where is God? Why didn't he take care of me during this really hard thing? And so I found myself really asking, do you really want the answer to this? Or do we want to talk about this another time? Is this really the question? Is that what you're really trying to figure out? And a couple of times they said, no, I don't really want the answer to that question. They're honest that this is not the issue. So I do think we have to address them. We don't want to shut people down. We just have to be careful that as Christians, we're not responding to people's concerns or doubts out of fear. Don't respond out of fear that you have to get it all right all the time,
I think it's important that we want to defend what we believe because we believe it, but it's not our job to be constantly proving, that God exists or no, this is legit. You should look at this, this, and this. It's if you believe it's true, then just live like it's true. And people are going to have questions and you're going to have questions. And so you don't have to have all the answers because God has the answers.
Yep.
And,
I do think once the heat of the moment dies down and you do walk with people, there are good answers to a lot of the questions. Not all of them.
Yes.
But someone might have a really complicated question or a deep question about, can we trust the Bible? And if you shut it down or you give a simplistic answer in that moment, I don't think that's helpful.
No.
I think being able to walk, all right, let's talk about this over. It's going to take some time. Let's look at some resources. We're not going to be able to answer this question in one moment. These are hard questions that people have been debating for hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years. So I think the problem is when somebody is, again, acting out of fear and shuts the person down who have really good questions.
It's about knowing your audience,
Sure.
too. We can talk to each other a little differently than, somebody else. It's easier for us to explain away a tragedy by saying this is a part of God's plan and we don't get it, but we have to, but to say that to somebody, you got to meet them where they are, and they are not there. If that's just not acceptable.
That's good, knowing your audience. Maybe also asking the question, why do you want to know the answer? What kind of answer are you looking for? Because then that, I think, will let you know if they really do want to talk at this moment and you really want to maybe they just want to be heard. And
so we are about at time.
Okay.
So we can save three for next week.
That's great. That's good.
All right. We will hit the next three next time.
Sounds good.
Bye. If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.